This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
Competition starting to get thick, it's the click, so I hope you watch your A game. A made no rain from the track when we unite and spit. This is an A game, better bring your A game. Competition starting to get thick, it's the click, so I hope you watch your A game. A made no rain from the.
Rest in peace, Aki Bono. His name's Chad Rowan, I believe. The last name is Rowan. He's from right here in Hawaii, so this is actually a big story here locally. In fact, I actually took my kid to the kids museum down in I think it's in Waikiki, and they actually have like a little bit of a monument to him in there. They have like his footprints on the ground and say Aki Bono, and they have like a big picture of him, and so like my kid would go and stand in his footprints. She doesn't know the story. She's probably gonna find out one day. So she would stand in his footprints, and it kind of like shows the history of him being like the first. I don't know if he's the only ever, but like the first American-born like Yokozuna sumo champion in
first
sumo history.
I think the first.
I think the first. So he died at the age of 54. Not only was he like one of the great sumo wrestlers of all time, super famous in Japan, which I found out later. Super famous in Japan. He also was an MMA fighter and a pro wrestler. Apparently he is a keg stand brawler, which I ended up finding out a little bit. So here's the story, and I've told this a couple times over on our old channel on Fight Game Media. So some of you guys, if you've heard the story before, feel free to skip ahead a little bit because we still have some more stuff to talk about. But so I want to say it was like 2006, 2007 timeframe. My supervisor, and I'm not gonna say his name because he's still active in the military. My supervisor at the time, he had gotten a DUI. And so his license had gotten suspended for like, I think it was like 6-9 months, something like that. So he couldn't drive. So my ass was driving him everywhere. I had to go pick him up for work. Like I was like his chauffeur basically. And so whenever he got his license back, whenever the suspension was lifted, I decided to throw him a keg party. Okay, that was my first mistake. It's like, because like, You don't like, that's not how you celebrate getting your license back. But I was like 23 at the time and he was like 25. So let's just say we were pretty stupid. Okay.
Kids.
Yeah. We're essentially young kids in the military stationed overseas away from our family. We're not making the best choices. Right. So I think it was like a Saturday, like I said, 06, 07 timeframe. And I just remember I go to the gas station and I get the keg and I didn't have a way to actually get it to the place where I was supposed to take it, because it just wouldn't fit in my little car. I had a little Toyota Celica. I had no like, and there was like stuff in the trunk I couldn't. So they just give me a dolly, and like so I'm wheeling it down the road in a dolly, and like a cop pulls up, like one of the security forces members. I think she was like a tech sergeant or something like that, and she just like rolls down her window. She's like, "You guys are gonna be good, right?" And I go, "Oh yes, ma'am. No worries. No, like it's gonna be a great night. Don't worry about it." And so we ended up wheeling it down there. And we started like early in the day, probably like 1:00 in the afternoon. And, you know, we're drinking beers. People brought liquor. We were barbecuing. We had all kinds of stuff going on. We're playing beer pong. And as people would kind of come by the place where we're partying, because it was a part of like our apartment complex, I was inviting people to come over, like just random strangers, like people I just didn't even know. Because I had that reputation. I was just that kind of guy. So I'm inviting people over. People would stop by. They'd play a game of beer pong, or they'd take a drink or a shot with us, and they'd just be on their way. We had poker tables set up. We had all kinds of stuff. It was a great party, right? In fact, Roger, I'm going to send him this clip. My friend Roger, I think, took a lot of people's money that night because he's very good at poker. So anyway, hours go by, and at one point, I'm probably 24, 25 beers deep. And I should preface that by saying I haven't had a drink in like 10 years. So actually more than 10 years. So, and this story is one of the many reasons why I don't drink anymore. So I'm like, 24, 25 beers deep, probably a couple of shots as well. Chances are, knowing me. And I see this group of guys, all island boys. So Filipino, Chamorros from Guam, Hawaiian, Samoans, Tongans, like just all kind of the island boys kind of stuck together over there in Japan. And Aki Bono, who, and I didn't recognize him at the time, but Aki Bono spent a lot of time on base, and he would hang out with all the young airmen and all the young NCOs that were from the islands, because he's from Hawaii. and that was kind of like customary. He was kind of like their uncle kind of, and his wife worked on base, so he had base access, so he can kind of come and go as he pleases because his wife was able to sign him onto base. It was fine. So he would come and he would hang out a lot. He would actually come to like a lot of events around the base, and he was very nice to everybody. I even heard like later when I told the story, like, you mean Chad, the guy that buys everybody like Burger King at the baseball games? Like, oh yeah, that guy. So anyway, so he's with him. I don't recognize him at this point. He's with him, and then like there's a bunch of the Island Boys, and I remember telling my friend Thibodeau, I was like, hey, I'm gonna go invite those guys over, man. I recognize a couple of those guys from the gym, and he was like, Mike, those guys don't want to talk to you. I was like, no, everybody fucking loves me. Second mistake. So I then walk up to them, and I'm drunk as shit. But in my head, I'm being eloquent and professional and just super nice, and everybody loves me. I walk up there and I go to invite them to come over to the cake, to the cake party. And one of his guys pie faces me, just puts his hand in my face and shoves me. And then he goes behind his friends, right? There's like 8, 9 of them, right? He goes behind his friends and like starts like bowing up and flexing on me, saying, what are you going to do about it? And so, like, me being me, I charged after him, right? And I start to go after this guy, and like they're holding me back. What I didn't know then that I knew later was that was the cue for them to jump me. But they didn't jump me, thank God, because I'm still breathing. They didn't jump me. They're just trying to defuse the situation, but I wasn't having it because somebody put their fucking hands on me, and I can't stand that, right? And so I go after this guy, and like big altercation ensues. My friends jump in. There's like a bunch of pushing and shoving. I don't think punches were being thrown at this point. And like they're to defuse it. Here comes the biggest motherfucker I've ever seen, and he's like, "Hey, everybody, get back, get back, get back!" And but I still see this guy over there talking shit, and I got this big guy in front of me, and I'm like trying to get past him, and he's like holding me back. Now in this situation, from what I can gather, from what I'm being told later in life, I might have commented on the man's weight. In fact, I think one of the quotes is, so you know, what are you gonna do about it, you fat motherfucker? And I was like, I'll kick your fucking ass. Now I'm gonna kick his ass, and I'm gonna kick all their asses. He didn't like that part. And so I got people, and he's like he's not trying to hurt me, right? And so he's like pushing me back, and like, fuck you. And I'm calling him fat. I'm saying whatever I can say to get into this guy's skin, because I want to go get his friend that's hiding behind him like a coward, right? To this day, I still got heat with that guy. I don't know who he is, but if I saw him and I recognized him, it might be on site, even though I'm fucking old and brittle now. But so I said enough to set the guy off, and I have my friends behind me, and I have my ex-wife behind me, and Akibono just shoves me back, and he just and I go flying, right? So does my ex-wife, and she goes flying. She hits her fucking head on the concrete, right? And she's passed out. But I didn't notice because I'm more worried about what's going on over there. And then all of a sudden the cops show up, and you would think that the cops showing up would get me to defuse the situation. And it actually got me more pissed off, and I'm still going after this guy. And like, so finally one of the cops, who happens to be a friend of mine, her name was Malu. We and her actually talked about this situation like 10 years later. Like we're having some, it was probably like 6-7 years later, but we were having dinner one night at Travis Air Force Base. And we talked about it, just joking about it. But she was like holding me back. She's from Tonga. She's like holding me back. She's like, Mike, shut the fuck up. Get over here. And it's like, she's holding me. A lot of people are holding me. The cops, they get him to calm down. They calm him down. He's too big to fit in the back of the cop car. So they actually have him get inside it. He was in an Escalade. He gets inside of his Escalade, and his wife has to drive him to the police station. And he's getting fingerprinted, all this and that. Well, the ambulance show up, and I'm like, why the fuck is the ambulance here? Oh, another friend of mine was like, hey, your wife got knocked out. I was like, who the fuck knocked her out? And they said Akibono, or him, the big guy, knocked her out. So then I go after him again. And the cops are holding me back. Everybody's holding me back. Ambulance shows up. I get in the ambulance with my ex-wife. And then we get over to the ER, and I'm all charged up. I'm cutting promos the whole time. We get to the hospital, and they check her out. She's fine. She actually didn't even have that much to drink, and I think she's probably over exaggerating, which was kind of a typical thing in our marriage, to be honest with you. So sorry.
We don't need that.
Yeah, we don't need that. So anyway, we get there, and one of the cops comes in, and he wants me to do a breathalyzer test. And I'm like, okay. So I was like, but I wasn't driving. They go, yeah, we just want to know how drunk you are. I said, okay. And they actually put this on the form. I blew a 0.24.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, .24, and they're like, damn it. And then like Malu comes in and she goes, Mike, you blew a .24. I'm like, fuck yeah, I did. I'm like kind of proud of it. And then she goes, do you know who that was? And I was like, who what? She goes, the big guy. Do you know who that was? And I was like, no, who the fuck is he? I want to kick his ass. Tell me where he's at, like that kind of stuff. And she goes, that was Aki Bono. I was like, the guy from WrestleMania? And she goes, because he'd wrestled Big Show a couple years before that. And she goes, yeah, Aki Bono, the sumo wrestler. You just tried to fight Aki Bono. And then I got like random people, 6'9", 500 pounds.
500 pounds. Yeah. A monster.
Yeah. He gets bigger every time I tell the story, actually, and I get tougher every time. So again, this story is half from my perspective and half from what my drunk friends told me later. So I would say it's probably like 75% true. But if we end up getting like the security footage, it might be like half true. I have no idea. I'm just telling you from my perspective. So I got medics coming in and everything. And I'm like, oh shit, Aki Bono's like, he's like super famous, right? She goes, he's like one of the most famous people in Japan. I was like, oh shit. And so anyway, we leave the hospital because my ex-wife's fine. We get back to the apartment. The next day the cops show up to my apartment. And they go, hey, Mr. Gilbert, we just want to take your statement. And I was like, look, here's my statement. It was just a drunk argument. I don't want to fight that guy. I don't want any issues. And I definitely don't want him to go to jail. It was just pushing and shoving. Nobody got hurt. It's all good for me. And they go, are you sure? I was like, yes, all good on this end. I don't want it. No charges, no nothing, no big deal. And they go, okay, well then that ends up being the statement. A couple days later, or a couple days later at the gym, I recognize one of the guys from the altercation and go, dude, what the fuck happened? And he looks at me. He's like, oh, hey, yeah, sorry about that. I was like, what happened? Like, what did I do? Why did that guy shove me? He goes, we don't like people approaching us. I was just like, I was inviting you to have a drink. And he goes, well, yeah, but we were also drinking. We had been at the club for hours and we were all drunk. And then we just saw some guy walking up to us. That guy didn't know you and he just shoved you. And I was just like, what the fuck crawled up his ass? He's like, he's fine. Don't worry about it. I was like, okay. I was like, well, hey, tell the big guy, tell Aki Bono that like, I told the cops I don't want to press charges on him. He should be fine from now. But I told everybody like, leave the guy alone. He goes, okay, well, I'll tell Chad that. No, no problem. And then me and him shook hands. We squashed it. Well, I don't see Aki Bono again for a while after that. And like 6 months goes by and I'm at the pool one day and there's all of them, every single one of them. And I'm like, and I could see them from the fence. And I'm like, well, this could go a lot of ways, but it's like early in the day, nobody's drinking. And I just walk up and I have my towel and I'm just going to go over and I walk right past all of them. So it's like, they're either going to kick my ass or they're going to leave me alone, but we're about to find out. I looked over at him. He looked back at me. I gave him a nod like that. He nodded back and we squashed it at that moment. That was the end of it. So nothing ever came of it. It never hit the press because it never left the base. Like, it didn't. I think we have a thing called the blotter. So I think it did reach the blotter, but it never like reached the newspapers or anything like that. Because if it did, a lot of people, I probably would have been in some shit. He would have been in some shit. But I was like, no, let's just fucking squash this right now. I'm not going to talk about this thing until I'm at a party or I'm on a podcast. So here we are.
It's my third time hearing that story, and it gets better every single time. Because again, when I heard that, the first time I hear Aki Bono dies, the first thing I'm always going to think of is Mike almost fought that guy. And but he could have killed Mike.
he could have, yeah. Because I was pretty full of myself because I was training. Like, I was doing jiu-jitsu and wrestling and some kickboxing at the time. I wasn't any good, but I was like doing it. And so I was like, kind of full. I was like, I could probably handle myself, but honestly, they all probably could have killed me, and especially him. Like just one shot from him would have probably knocked my whole block off.
Here's the thing. Aki Bono was Yokozuna. He was the champion. He was the grand champion, the world heavyweight champion of sumo. So at a time, he was literally the greatest sumo wrestler on the planet. He'd have slapped the shit out of you.
He died at 54. So this was almost 20 years ago. He was in his like late 30s at the time. So still relatively like young guy. He's younger. He was younger then than I am now, basically. Yeah. So it would have, I remember telling my commander on like that Monday morning, because my supervisor was like, hey, we gotta go tell the boss. Like, oh shit, okay. So we go tell him and he goes, well, did you swing at him? And I was just like, no, sir. I just said a lot of mean words to him. And he goes, and you're still here, huh? It's like, yes, sir. He goes, all right, well, he's like, maybe you don't need to be doing cake parties anymore. And I was like, I think that's a good idea, boss. And like nothing ever came of it. It was awesome. Like, and the crazy thing is, and I told my first sergeant, and he just laughed his ass off. And I'm just like, I wish I had like airmen like me right now. I would deserve that, because the airmen I got were like more dramatic. Now I want like idiots like me, because I was a total idiot. But I wasn't like a nefarious or a bad person. I was just a moron that was like partying too much, you know what I mean, and getting into stupid altercations.
Dude, I mean, that's part of, I hate to say this, but it's part of growing up is making mistakes like that. And especially in your 20s, like, you know, you mess up, you do stupid shit. Not all of us try to fight Akebono, but we all have, I think there's, I ain't going to share any, if the moment comes up, I'll share some of my own stories someday, but, I ain't never tried to fight Akebono, man. That's a hell of a story. It's every time I hear the name Akebono, I'll always think of you. And I was sad.
Well,
I was sad when I heard that. And again, I'm glad you told the story again.
Yeah, me too, because I'm kind of always going to be kind of like connected to him a little bit, like, or he's always going to be like, me and him will always be kind of connected. And he I know he died with dementia and he didn't really have any memory of it. I bet that wasn't even like that big of a deal to him. Like afterwards, that's probably like, you know, there's probably been like 100 other people that probably squared up on him, because a lot of people get drunk and they think square up on the big guy. Right. So it probably didn't even like mean anything to him. But to me, it's like, that's like a big story. And in fact, like after that, like I'd be walking around the base like, oh shit, that's the guy that tried to fight Akebono. Like that's the idiot. Right. And so like, I kind of like, I had that, like a little bit of that reputation. And I carried that with me for a while, because the Air Force is small, and like I would go, my next base was in Las Vegas, and there were people that I was stationed with in Japan that were in Las Vegas. And then like in Travis Air Force Base after that, I was, you know, people that I was stationed with. So, and then the story spreads, and like, it just gets bigger and bigger and worse and worse. And like, and depending on who tells the story, like for me, I'm more of a badass, but other people tell the story like he's a bigger idiot. Right. So it's just one of those things, man. But I was pretty upset when I heard that he had died. Because I'm always going to kind of like be connected with him a little bit. You know, people love that story too, and I like telling it.
I love it. It's a very much a Rashomon story. Like, everyone's got a different version of it, much like the CM Punk footage last night. You see what you want to see.
And it was very appropriate to tell the story, because it was like a whole to-do about some shoving and stuff like that kind of took on a life of its own, kind of like with the All In thing, you know.
But that's most fights. Like, you know, you watch TV, and most, like, we're going to watch They Live this weekend, and that is the greatest fight in cinematic history. Keith David, Roddy Piper, amazing fight scene. That doesn't happen in real life. Most real life fights involve some punching or some pushing, a couple punches here and there, and a lot of yelling.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Mine all involve double legs, because I wrestle. So, but I mean, like meathead stuff, it happens. It's part of growing up. Great story though. Absolutely great.
Yeah, he was 6'9" and 500 pounds. I was 10 foot tall and bulletproof, because I was having like 25 beers in my system. So all right, guys, thank you for sticking around for the story.